Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. This video is going to be kind of a training video. I'm getting ready to do my framing punch list, which is a part of my trim install process, except as you can see, it starts before there's any actual drywall on the walls. I go through a variety of different things to make sure that my millwork install goes extremely well. I also look for potential issues right now, that way they can be corrected before we have problems down the road after it's a lot more work to fix. I've shared this saying many times, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. A lot of these minor details are easy to fix now, easy to correct, but later on they take a ton of time. So I'm going to show you my 10-step process I do on every high-end home that I trim. Hope you guys enjoy the video. Now the first part of this process, one of the most critical things that I do is I mark all my studs with orange paint. There's a couple reasons for that. One of them is it just makes my job easier later on when I'm installing baseboard. I hate being bent over and trying to use a stud finder as I'm nailing to find the studs. So if you take orange paint and mark the studs on the floor, it just makes it a lot easier to go along and bump and run, and you're not having to have another hand on a stud finder on the wall all the time. So that's an easy thing. I like to make a nice heavy mark because drywall dust will cover the paint, and also when the painter primes the walls, that mark will get covered a little bit. So a good heavy line, and I just go along, line it up, mark them. It's very easy to do. So with the orange paint on these really large homes, it might take me 3 or 4 cans of paint. Unfortunately, it's about doubled in price to 10 bucks a can now, but that's pretty standard for me. Second step is blue paint. We want to mark all the water lines to ensure that I'm not putting any nails or screws where they're not supposed to be. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. It's a step that's really important to me. It ensures that the job is going to go smoothly. There's nothing worse than getting to the end of a project, turning on the water and finding out you've got a leak somewhere. Could cause tons of damage on these large homes. You do not want that. Now basically, whenever I'm marking water lines, it's not even just water lines. I want to mark anything that I absolutely don't want to put a nail into. So for example, right here, as I'm looking at this, we've got a master bathroom on the other side of this with a soaking tub. I don't even know what all this is, but there's a ton of stuff right here I absolutely don't want to put a nail into. So whenever I mark stuff like this, I blew out the whole thing. So I've got my orange where I know my stud is, but then this is telling me, hey, there's nasty stuff back in here. Be very careful when you're shooting. And it's just a very good way to ensure nothing bad happens. What happens, especially in a lot of production homes, you'll get sloppy plumbers, and whenever they put their water lines in, as you can see this water line right here, it's only a ½ inch inside the drywall. And what can happen as you run your stud finder along here, the sonar on the stud finder will signal that there's a stud here when it's actually a pipe or something like that, and you'll put a nail in it and it's a bad day. So marking stuff like this, it's well worth the time that it takes to do it. Even if the carpenter isn't doing it, I recommend that builders have a project manager do it or something like that, because it saves so much headache and expense down the road with water leaks. Another key thing I look for on every house is the line set. The line set connects different HVAC equipment together, and it's copper lines that are running through the walls. A lot of times they're flopping around, and your stud finder, whenever you put it across, it'll be against the drywall at times. I've actually nailed straight into line sets once before. Homeowner moves in, air conditioner doesn't work, and it's because there's 2 trim nails in it. So I always mark these, and as you'll see down on the floor, I like to even put an arrow to it and put line set. It's not so much of a big deal whenever you're nailing off base. It's easy to mark that, but it becomes a challenge if you're doing any kind of a wall paneling or especially crown molding up above. It's very easy to accidentally nail into those. So back here we've got a line set going up the whole way up the wall, and let's just say, for example, they want me to put crown molding in this bathroom, which would be very common. If I'm running my stud finder along up there and I didn't have my head about me, it would be very easy to mistake that as a stud and put nails in it. But if I walk into this bathroom and I know I've got blue all over the floor with an arrow and a LS for line set, I know exactly what's going on up there, and it ensures that I don't put any nails in that. So the next step, and probably the most important step for me in this whole process that makes my life easier down the road, is I like to go through the whole house and ensure that all the doors are plumb. Now in this house, we've got some big 8-foot doors, and it's critical that you get these plumb. That way, whenever you're going to install them, the millwork install will look perfect. If you get door openings that are cross-legged or way out of plumb, it's a nightmare to install doors. So again, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. It's well worth it for me to go through this process. I put my level on the door. This one is perfect as it is. If it isn't, I've got my sledgehammer right here, and I'll just tap the bottom plate a little bit until it's plumb. Now it's very important to have the doors plumb. If they're way out of plumb, they can actually fall open or closed on their own, just under their own weight. And sometimes if you end up with one side that is plumb and one side that is not, it makes it really difficult to install the door properly. Now I mentioned cross-legged earlier. What we absolutely don't want is we've got two sides of a door frame going down. We want them to be in the perfect plane. So like with this wall, we want everything to be in plane. What happens with cross-legged is you end up with one side being different from the other, and whenever you're trying to set a door and get the door to close perfectly on the doorstop, it makes it really difficult. So if you have to leave a door out of plumb, ideally you want to have both sides equally out of plumb. That way it's not cross-legged, it's still in the same plane. There are situations where, let's say these studs were nailed directly to a wall here and I couldn't move them around, and it was just out of plumb and I couldn't really do anything about it. Then I would move over here to this side and I would check and see, okay, how close is it to being the same amount out of plumb and in plane as the other side, and I would try to get those to be close. Again though, we really don't want doors to be more than a 1/4 inch out of plumb. If you get doors that are like a 1/2 inch out of plumb, that's where they start opening and closing on their own. So when I do this, I'm just walking around, I'm checking. Usually I just check it this way. Now you can also look at the inside of your door as well to see where it's at. If the doors are towed in, sometimes your door actually won't fit in the opening, and that's a bad deal. The framer that I work with usually does a pretty good job with this, so a lot of times I don't spend time actually looking at the inside plumb. I'm more looking at the cross-legged aspect of it, if that makes any sense. As far as tolerances go, I'm really just looking to get the door openings to be with plus or minus 1/8 of an inch of plumb. They don't have to be absolutely perfect. We're really just trying to find the really bad openings. In my experience with this framer, usually about 90, maybe even 95% of the doors are pretty decent, but then I'll find a few of them in a large house like this that are like way out of whack. And those are the ones that I'm really glad that I find and fix beforehand, because it's a pain to fix them afterwards. Now when it comes to adjusting your sill plate, whenever you need to move it in and out, we're on subfloor right here, so it doesn't take a whole lot of force to move that thing around. You can see here, I've even got a red chalk line on the floor. If I wanted to move that over, just hit that plate, and that just moved probably 3/16 of an inch, maybe even close to a 1/4 inch. Want to move it back, you can do that. Now the thing that you gotta keep in mind, if you have a really bad opening and you've got, let's say it's a 1/2 inch out of plumb and you've got to make a major correction. If I try to move this sill plate a 1/2 inch, I have to think there's going to be flooring installed here at some point also, and that could mess up the hardwood flooring lines, the grout lines, etc. So keep that in mind. Sometimes you do have to leave them a little bit out of plumb. You don't want to do anything crazy that's going to really make things look weird. All right, guys, so the next thing, extremely important, so many builders don't do this enough, is get the proper blocking in the ceiling before drywall. There's been so many times I've been called to show up to a job site with other builders and they want beams in the ceiling, and guess what? There's no blocking up there because there was no pre-planning in advance. So it's extremely important at this stage to get blocking in the ceiling. Now I've got a whole list that I'm going to show on the side of the screen here of different types of blocking that I look for and I install myself. First up, we're right here in this great room. We're going to have some kind of a coffered ceiling or beams on this ceiling, and as you look up there, you'll see that we've got a grid pattern. This is a 9-box pattern, so I assume they're going to have a coffered ceiling of some type up here, but very important to have that blocking up there so that I can anchor everything together. That way when we put all that millwork up there, we know, we just feel good about it. We don't feel like, oh man, this is not held up very well. Another example of blocking that I look for is for floating shelves. Floating shelves are very popular. Now, if I was installing floating shelves in a niche like this, not too big of a deal. I've got plenty to anchor my shelf into on the back side here, and if I have support going across the front, that'll support it. But let's say I had a floating shelf that was only going to be 3 foot wide right here and not supported on the ends. That's the time where I would want to get in and install some steel blocking, potentially beforehand, before drywall to support those. Another key area to put blocking is in your staircases for your newel posts, skirt boards, and handrail brackets. So let's say, for example, I was going to have a handrail going up right here. One thing I hate is having my handrail brackets off center. So if I knew I was going to have 3 brackets on a wall like this, I would make sure that I've got blocking wherever that center bracket is going to be. Also down here, I'm running my handrail down. I'm running it flush with the front edge of my tread right here. There's no blocking in here. So this would be an area where I might want to nail a 2x12 in there. That way I can put that handrail bracket wherever I want. For newel post and handrails, in some instances we might have a newel post mounted against the wall right here. Some instances we may just have a handrail terminating into the wall. But as you see, I've only got 1 stud right here and I might not be able to hit it. So this is an area where I want to measure up 36 inches off the subfloor and center some blocking right here to ensure that I've got something solid to mount that handrail into. If we come over here, we've got a big open area and a balcony right here. Again, I'm either going to have handrails or a newel post terminating into this wall right here. If we come around this area, I only have 1 stud on the end. That's not very much. So there's a good chance where my handrail or newel post would terminate, there's not going to be any blocking. So I want to take a 2x12 and nail it in here so that I can anchor that in place. Again, 36 inches up off the subfloor to the center of our blocking. If we turn around over to this side, you'll see I've got a bunch of framing on this end, so I don't need to do anything here. I can look at this and say, okay, I've got plenty to fasten, whether I'm just doing a handrail or a newel post, there's plenty of meat there to fasten into. Now here's a situation that'll get you. I've got a shower up here. Obviously I've got a drain pipe coming out of the floor, so this is going to be a tile shower. I see the plumbing on the wall here. There's going to be a glass shower door on this wall. This isn't necessarily in my scope of work to watch out for, but it's something that I'll note and relay to the project manager if I see it. That shower door, if it's going to pivot, it's going to need to have solid blocking behind it. So if the shower guys come to install their glass door and there's nothing there, you end up tearing out drywall on the backside and stuff like that. So again, being preventative and finding these issues in advance saves so much time and headache down the road. So we'd want to make sure we know where's the swing going to happen, if there's going to be a swing on any tile showers for glass doors, and ensure there's blocking behind those. A couple other quick things to mention. Here we're up in this balcony area. There's going to be paneled wall and a secret door hidden in here. It's another thing I watch out for. If any framing needs to be adjusted in advance for my secret door to work, I watch out for that also. A lot of times you need to widen the door openings a little bit to accommodate secret bookshelves and all that stuff. So hopefully that helps on all the blocking. look at that list. A lot of things to watch out for. Really important to find those things in advance. Now, with a lot of the style changes happening now, we're doing way more drywalled returns around windows and less window casing. Also doing a lot more flush baseboard and things like that. And that's where at this stage of the game, you got to get in and get those things taken care of. So I would find out right now, are there any windows that are going to have drywall returns? Does the whole house have drywall returns on the windows? And this would be the stage where I would knock those out as well. Now, the reason that that is important on the windows is because you have to shim the entire rough opening so that you get equal reveals and margins all the way around where the drywall meets the window. You can't just rely on the rough opening to put drywall against because it varies too much and it looks terrible if you don't shim it in advance. So if we wanted drywall returns, this actually doesn't get drywall returns, but if we wanted them, you'll notice on this side of the window, we've got a larger margin than on the other side over here. If you went ahead and just put drywall on this, it would look terrible. So whenever we're shimming our openings, that's what we're doing. We're getting everything looking good. Stay tuned for a future video. We've got another modern house coming up with all drywall window returns. I'm going to show you the whole process that I've been doing to shim those and show you what it looks like to install the corner bead, mud those, and get those looking as good as possible. So stay tuned for that. Okay, next topic, bathroom hardware. Now, I use drywall anchors a lot. I've used them for years. They work great, but they're not perfect. Here we're gonna have a vanity. If little Johnny or Susie decides he wants to grab the towel holder and pull on it, and it's just a drywall anchor, it's really easy to loosen those up over time. It's potentially a callback for me or the builder to go fix something, and just a lesser quality product for the homeowner. So if I have time, I like to get in and install blocking where I know we're going to have a towel holder. Just put a 2x12 across, a 2x10, 2x8, something that you can anchor that towel holder into so that it's not going to loosen up. It's easy to identify those over vanities because you know you're going to have a towel holder on the side of a vanity. Now also, here we've got a toilet area and you're going to need a TP holder. Usually a TP holder requires you to mount in 2 different locations. So I always try to at least get one side of the TP holder mounted in a stud. And if you don't install blocking, that means the other side you're going to be using drywall anchors. Here you can kind of tell, okay, you're going to have a TP holder either on this side or this side. Put a 2x12 or 2x8, actually really only need a 2x8 in there where you know that thing's going to be 26 inches off of the subfloor, or 26 to 27 inches if we're going just off the subfloor to the center of that blocking. It gives you something really solid to mount that into, and again ensures that it's going to stay solid for the long haul, and it's not going to be an inconvenience for the homeowner. Next topic, pocket doors. There are some key things that I always try to check whenever I'm doing my framing walkthrough. Again, it prevents a lot of problems. You guys have probably seen me over the years with my long bit extensions inside the cavity after drywall's in, trying to screw these things in because the framer didn't put screws and stuff like that. So I want to try to catch those things in advance. First thing I look for, number 1, is there a track up there? You wouldn't believe how many times I've gotten to trim stage and there's no track in the opening. So I check for that. Now, a lot of you guys I'm watching who are doing these really high-end homes are starting to have, the builders are having you, the finish carpenter, install the pocket door kits yourself using LSL studs, custom high-end tracks and stuff like that. On most of the homes I'm doing, I'm not quite there yet. We have started to use LSL studs on some of our homes going forward. But as you can see here, this is more of a typical 2x6 wall pocket door installation. So first thing I'm looking for, is there a track up there? Second thing, I don't know why, but the framers insist on never screwing them in every single hole. So a lot of times I'll come and check these and I'll have a hole on the end and there's no screw. Obviously the weight of the door is all hanging on the back side and on the front here. So if there's not a screw in those areas, one needs to be added because the track will sag under the weight of the door. That's extremely important once you get into 8-foot doors and really heavy doors. Next thing I do a quick mental check on, this is actually a double pocket door opening, so there's 2 pocket doors coming together here. We've got split jambs on both sides. You'll see there's a 2x6 block nailed, just tacked in place temporarily on the center of our split jamb opening here. Now, I don't know the physics behind this, but I've found this for all the years I've been trimming. If you don't put this block on here and hold these 2 split jambs together, the weight of the drywall, there's something about it, it makes these split jamb want to spread apart and they widen at the center. We have found if you nail a 2x6 block, holding these together and keep those held together through the drywall process, they'll stay much straighter. So then whenever I get to trim stage, I'll just pop this off and everything stays a lot straighter. As I mentioned before, we are starting to transition to using LSL studs instead of just regular timber on these openings, so that also helps ensure that they stay really straight as well. If you're not familiar with what LSL is, I believe it's laminated strand lumber. It's basically similar to an LVL where you've got multiple plies. It kind of looks a little bit like OSB, except it's the size of a full stud. And it's engineered, so the engineered product stays much straighter than traditional wood. So, so with standard timber, obviously you get cups and bows and twists and all that. With the LSLs, you don't get that. Okay guys, going through my checklist, I've also got a line item where I look for certain things that affect my bid or the price that I give for the job. These are things that kind of happen on every house but aren't necessarily standard, so I look for them and account for them. Right above me here, we've got an attic access going up into the attic. A lot of times I try and note how many of those there are because some homes there might be 1 or 2, some homes there might be 6. Also, as we come around here, we've got, this happens a lot also where we have to have an attic access to access this side of the attic. This is going to probably be a door. Sometimes I'll actually make a panel out of plywood and trim and install it. Some builders also will have a custom door made, so I need to account for that in my price. So that's one thing, attic accesses. I've learned over the years whenever I'm installing doors, especially for production builders, a lot of times they don't leave enough space on the side of the door for a full width of casing to fit. That means you have to scribe that. Some houses that I've trimmed, you end up scribing a dozen pieces of casing that it takes a ton of time because you've got to fit each one to the wall. That was something I used to account for in my quotes a lot more. As I've got into where I'm doing much more higher end homes, usually they have it built out enough where I don't encounter that nearly as much anymore, but it's something also in the back of my head I'm always looking for and noting if I see that scenario coming up, and I account for that in my price. Next item, garage steps. For years, the framer that I followed would always make his own garage step out of framing material, and he would anchor it to the framing, and it was terrible because I would get to trim stage and I would have to rip them out, put in a better quality garage step, so on and so forth. So I look, is there a garage step installed already? If it is it loose? What I want to see is I want to see that garage step be able to be removed, and that tells me that whenever it comes time for drywall, the drywallers will go ahead and drywall through the whole opening, and they won't try and notch around this. If it's fastened to the framing, I'll rip it out. That way we can ensure that drywall goes all the way around, and then whenever I need to install my better quality finished garage step, we don't have issues with drywall and all kinds of other things. So that's something I also look for. In the garage, we a lot of times have a pull down attic ladder. At this stage, I also look to see if there's a box framed in for an attic ladder. In this house, we've got living space above a lot of the garage, and there is no pull down attic ladder. And then that way I know I don't need to account for that in my quote. And I also will generally, if I see an opening, I'll look at the ceiling height overall, and I kind of know in my head what size it should be. And if I see that it's not the correct size framed in, I'll note that to the project manager. So guys, basically the whole point of what I'm doing here with looking for noted areas that might affect my price, I'm looking for just anything that triggers my mind that says, oh, that's going to be a pain, or that's going to be a unique situation that's going to take more time. If you can identify those at this stage, it'll also it helps prevent problems. It ensures that everything is done the way it needs to be done in advance. And then it also ensures that you account for it in your labor quote and that you can take pictures of it. So that's why I do this. It's experience that allows you to be able to see those things. But yeah, I just kind of look for anything that triggers my mind that, oh, this might be a unique situation that takes some time. Next thing I look for, electrical considerations. Not a ton of things to watch out for here. If you trim houses, you need job site power, which means you're going to have just a couple outlets in the whole house typically. Production homes, you might only get one outlet. I fuss a lot about this because whenever I'm on a job and we've got multiple trades in here trying to work, siding guys, masons, etc., we need to have enough power. So I look and see how many plugs do they have installed that I will be able to pull power from. I like to see on the main level at least 2 or 3 plugs on the main level, and then at least 1 on the upstairs and 1 or 2 in the basement as well as 1 or 2 in the garage. Typically it's just 1 in the garage. That way if there's somebody working outside, they can pull power off that. Here they gave me 2 outlets right here. I assume that that is because we've got 2 different circuits to pull power off of. I know I've also got an outlet on the other side of the house on the main level. So there's never enough outlets, but I want to make sure there's at least a minimal amount installed for me to get going with my work. The next thing I look for, a lot of times I install built-ins, and that means I'm going to be doing cabinetry, and the electrician is usually already put in some electrical boxes. Those may interfere with my built-ins. So anywhere I'm going to be installing millwork such as shiplap, wainscoting, built-ins, etc., I take a look at the outlets and switch boxes and make sure nothing's going to interfere. Same thing with ceiling can lights. Look at how all those things are going to come together with your millwork, and if it needs to be changed, it's way easier to do it now. Also, let's say I wanted to have some adjustability with this outlet. At this stage, I could also remove the electrician's outlet box and loop the wire. I don't recommend doing that because they already kind of have their thing figured out. But a lot of times, if you want to be able to install your built-ins and then put the outlet where you want it, it's nicer to have a loop in the wall that you can cut in your box, pull it through, put in a remodel box, versus having a box that is in a fixed location. Whenever it comes to plumbing, there's not a lot of things that I have to watch out for. I mark the water lines. That's huge. Identify the line sets, fireplace, valves, access, and then whenever you have toilets, you want to make sure that the water lines are high enough that they're not going to interfere with your baseboard. Past that, I don't really look for a lot of things in related to plumbing. Last item I want to hit on is taking pictures. Now, anytime I'm going to be installing beams or a coffered ceiling, I love it if I can have a picture of the framing where I can go back and look at, okay, where is that blocking exactly? It's super handy. Things like also electrical boxes behind built-ins or shiplap. Now, a lot of times we all know drywallers will cover up electrical outlet boxes and they get buried in the drywall. That becomes a real problem if you install shiplap on top of a wall also. Makes it really hard to find those. Having a picture of a wall and where all the outlets are at on that wall is very handy. It gives me some reassurance to know that I'm not covering anything up. Also makes it easier. I've had this happen where the builder will call me up and say, hey, I thought we had an outlet on this wall in such and such spot. I can go back and look at my pictures as well and figure out if there was or there wasn't. Now these days, the main builder I work for takes very good pictures of the whole job in the mechanical stage, so they know where everything is at, but I like to have my own photos of stuff as well because it's easy for me to pull it up. So that wraps up this video, guys. I hope you found it helpful. I know for a lot of guys who are doing the more production style homes, going to this much work seems like a lot, and it seems like, man, am I gonna be able to get paid for all that? But I've worked from production homes all the way up to high-end homes. And I've found once you get into the high end, it costs less money to do this stuff in advance because you're gonna end up fixing a bunch of crap later on if you don't pay attention to these kinds of details. It's really an essential part of the game. So I'm budgeting usually at least one day for me to have on the job site doing a framing prep, pre-drywall walkthrough, basically where I'm doing all this stuff. So hope you enjoyed the video. This is going to be an awesome house. You'll see more content on this as we progress over the next few months, so stay tuned. It's going to be a really cool one.